Living Life Juicy podcast. Conversations with interesting people you should know.
Welcome to the Living Life Juicy podcast, where we explore how we can be present and kind as we do great things. I'm your host and guide, John Losi. If you're interested in video resources and insights on how people learn and grow and how groups form, I've also got a Growing People podcast channel where you can find some of that stuff. If you're interested in what the Into Wisdom Group does, you can go to intowisdomgroup.com. And of course, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe to the podcast and tell others about it. We'd love to increase our reach. So today, our guest is Gina Iliopoulos. Gina Iliopoulos. She is founder and chief horticultural specialist at Keeler Gardens. It's a not-for-profit organization located in Chicago. And I met Gina actually through a long-standing relationship with her husband, who we've done a lot of work together. And then as we got to talking, I found out about Keeler Gardens, and I love what they're trying to do, but I'm not going to try and explain it. So I'm going to let Gina step in and tell a little bit about what it is and how she got there. So Gina, welcome. We're glad you're here.
And thank you so much. That was a mouthful. So we'll get started.
Well, and now you know that you don't have to worry about elegance and eloquence and all that kind of stuff. You can just stumble through just like I do. So I want to start off, and I do this with most of my guests, which is you are the founder and chief horticultural specialist for Keeler Gardens, but how did you get there? What's your origin story? Where did it come from? Why are you where you're at right now?
So it's actually really interesting. So my degree is in genetic engineering. I was at Illinois Tech here in Chicago, and my bachelor's is in genetics. So I did science and research for a really long time. And then somewhere along the line, I got really excited about nature, about gardens and plants, and I didn't really know what to do with that. So I ended up back at the Chicago Botanic Garden, which is here in the Chicagoland area, for an advanced, they call it a certificate of merit program. So I spent almost 2 years there, like 6 days a week, in all of these classes so that I could be considered what they call a professional gardener level 2.
Ooh,
so level two. And
yeah.
So that
just so you know, a little backstory here. I've got my degree in biology. And so I had my fill of genetics and genetic like diversity and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's fascinating stuff. Not fascinating enough for me to get into full-time genetics, but tell me, like, what does it mean to be a level 2 gardener?
So what the Chicago Botanic does is it teaches individuals how to manage green spaces. So the level 2 aspect actually included a lot of botany and plant management, healthcare, plant healthcare. So it's a lot of design work, because that's what landscape design is about. And it's a lot of plant knowledge, but there's more to it than that. So if you know a lot about plants and you're good at design, but you don't know, let's say, soil science, for example, or you don't know about disease control, then it would be hard to manage a whole space over the course of a whole year in all the different seasons. So it's seasonal discussions, it's health discussions, it's sustainability and environmental discussions. It's a wide range of things. And so the next level above me would have had to do more with advanced design planning for larger spaces, but I really wanted to focus on community development in urban areas where the spaces are small. So I didn't have to take that next level up. So that's what professional gardener level 2 encompasses. And it was an extensive program. I mean, when I started the program, they gave you years to complete it, because it was considered like an after work kind of thing, like you would take classes after work to advance your own career. And I did it straight through every single day, 6 days a week for that shorter time period of 18 months. And that's how I was able to complete it all at once.
Yeah, that sounds like, Cal Poly San Luis Obispo has a really excellent engineering and design, and that gets together. And because it's also an ag school, the school has a whole concentration on landscape design and management. And
So
so, yeah,
sorry.
I hung out with a bunch of soil scientists and things like that. So, man, it's complicated stuff.
And the cool thing about the Chicago Botanic is because they themselves have such a comprehensive plan for their whole space. They have a whole produce, vegetable island, and they have natives, and they have nature play for kids. It's so extraordinarily expansive that it allowed me to have what we call electives and some diversity in what I learned that then I could take with me after I took all these classes, and then went on to develop Keeler Gardens as a nonprofit.
So when you explain what you do, let's say you're at a nice little cocktail party or whatever, and so Gina, what do you do? How do you explain what you do to just common folk?
So basically, I say I run a small nonprofit in Chicago that focuses on environmental equity, which means we use the environment and we create environments, both indoors and out, that are safe, supportive, and inspiring in underserved communities where there's a bit of tunnel vision, where the inhabitants feel like maybe a little lack of hope or a little lack of possibility. We can shift that perspective and shift maybe even the direction that people are going in. And we have all kinds of studies that document how environments can change that. And so we use that in combination with that message of environmental equity to get some interest and some championing and some drive to invest in these neighborhoods.
So why? And I'm throwing a softball here, but
Yeah.
why is that important? Tell me a little bit about how it impacts and changes, especially those underserved neighborhoods.
So you use the word impact, and that's a really important word for us because we were using the term profound change, and change is a great word, but impact, it implies it matters. And the reason it matters has to do with some of these studies. So in underserved communities, and actually in communities everywhere, if you don't have a connection with nature, and this goes into some of those studies that I mentioned, if you don't have a connection with nature, and that can be either visual, a view artistically, or a connection with your community and people in your community, or time in green spaces. If you're missing some of those components in your day-to-day, there actually is a breakdown. Your biology, your chemistry, your natural chemistry and biology, the way people interact with each other, the way communities form and interact, all of those aspects depend on these nature connections. And like one specific, for example, is that there is a study that shows that when you have substantial green spaces, that's vegetation, green areas that are a certain height and a certain density, you actually build trust in a community. And that stems from the chemical balances that happen in our bodies that then lead to the ability for us to have actually like coherent, good discussions. It makes us good decision makers. So it's all these different levels that play together that allow individuals to build their strengths and allow communities to live off and combine those strengths and then to thrive. And it's important because do we ever really want any individual or community to fail? I mean, don't we want every person on the planet to do well, to do good, to do their best, to be their best? And this has the potential to support that substantially.
So I want to take it back a step a little bit. And I like to talk about how people navigate transitions. And I know that, first of all, starting a nonprofit is a big step, and especially moving from I think you have a background in sales and support that way, moving from there to following your passion for impacting communities with nature. How did you transition from one perspective to this nonprofit, nature-focused, impacting communities? How did you navigate that transition?
So what ended up happening, it was very interesting. So I was at the Chicago Botanic, and from there, I actually ended up in a professional firm, a landscaping firm. And then that position was eliminated. And at the same time, my husband's position was in flux and in question. And we got feeling that this idea, this concept that everybody needs to get up in the morning and go to a job and work to create some sort of success. We got the feeling that we were misplacing our energies. And that's why we decided to start the nonprofit, so that we could get up every day, do something that mattered to us, and give it away. So we gave away plants, we gave away classes, we gave away programs, we gave away materials, we gave away knowledge, just from the place of, why should we hold on to it? And I don't know if it was a transition so much, it was maybe like more of an awakening. And it just was like this big weight was lifted off of my shoulders. Like, I didn't have to worry about what I was going to charge for a class, or would people pay it, or how are we going to advertise? It was all just, here, do you need this? Do you want this? Here you go.
And there's something to say about an awakening, but then there's an awakening. Awakening, it means you got to get out of bed and do something about it.
Nope.
So I want to hear about, so you woke up, you realized that, man, we can give stuff away. It's important. People need it. How did you move it from an awakening and a dream to a reality of giving those plants away and setting up Keeler Gardens in the first place? Tell me a little bit about that change.
So it actually, it was a slow process. What ended up happening is, over the course of, gosh, like 2 years, a bunch of stuff happened, which would be another podcast. So a bunch of stuff happened, and there was a lot of interaction with the community and people and friends, a lot of conversations, a lot of questions. And then when we had that awakening, a lot of that giving away had sort of already started, because of the interactions and the people and the places and all of that was going on. And so two things happened. One thing happened was that we had contacts and friends who had applied for 501c3 status. That's the level of nonprofit that we are, 501c3. And they gave us a few tips. Use this terminology. Don't click that button. Check mark this. And that made the process of getting the 501c3 status a little smoother. So that was the first step. The second step was that once we got that 501c3 status, I used my connections in the landscape industry and just told them what we were doing. And they just started giving us stuff, just handing us stuff that we just distributed. We're talking about thousands of plants. Like, just this year alone, I think we've distributed more than 2,000 plants for sure, probably close to something like 3,000 or 4,000 plants. Just me, one person.
Where do those plants go? I mean, who are the recipients?
So it depends on the event, like what we're doing. So the first time this happened at the beginning of the year, we got a couple truckloads of vegetable plants, peppers and tomatoes. And that went out to schools, that went out to homeowners, like in the community, that went out to community gardens, that was here at Keeler Gardens. We use them as giveaways. We put them on the street and asked people to take them, and they took them to their school gardens, they took them to their homes, they harvested. So it was a broad range. And then my husband took a couple truckloads to the food pantry, where they come and they collect their perishables, but then we also had this one-time giveaway where they could grow their own food at home. So it was actually really exciting, that initial round. And then the second round was what we call perennials and shrubs. These are things that will come back every year. And so we did the same thing. We put a word out, and people just said, hey, do you happen to have any of this? Do you happen to have any of that? These were plants that would have ended up in a compost pile anyway. And so the group that we work with, Lurby Garden Center, they're like, sure, take whatever you want.
So real quick shift. You sparked an idea. I mean, maybe you've already thought of this, but as a fundraiser doing Adopt a Plant, to where you give away everything, but you have a place on your site of, if you want to contribute to the Keeler Gardens, adopt this plant for $25, $30, whatever it is. And then either you can plant it on site, or they can come by and pick it up.
So So we have tried that for years, and we've asked people to support us that way, and that has been relatively difficult. What we've learned over the past few years is that our reach and the communities that we reach to, and the people that we reach to, and that we serve, that where most of our marketing goes, are the ones in need, not the ones who are willing to sponsor, not the ones who can remunerate. Let's say we have some of that. Some people are very generous and very helpful. So that's why we're looking to other options, like more advertising and being on podcasts and speaking about what we do.
Well, yeah, and getting in front of, I realize I've run nonprofits before in the past, and there's the people who take advantage of your services and the people who support the services that you provide. And it's a very different approach. The fundraising and development is very, very different than marketing your services and product. And that's a huge challenge, which gets back to having sat in that chair before of how did it feel, or that big transition of income? Like, how did you change from having that, the income coming in to realizing that you're not only supporting yourself or supporting your nonprofit, but you have to support yourself as well? How did you transition with that? Because that's not easy, and that's a brave step.
Okay, so that was also another sort of long-term process, because once we started the nonprofit, there was a shift in income, but not like a changeover. It was like a little decrease, and then things fluctuated a little bit. And then after the second year, it was similar, and we had a little more help, and we were growing. And the third year, we thought we would stabilize, and that we would really take off, because we switched our message from this very, very altruistic message of biophilia, which is this connection with nature, and we added a whole scientific and psychological component and made it all about the sciences. So it was really pushing us in a really grounded direction. And then everything shut down in 2020, and we had to start all over again. And so what happened in 2020 was there was a shift and I think in everyone's attitude about income, about dollars, about how we're going to spend our time. And so that shift sort of gave us permission to sort of throw our hands up in the air and say, okay, if we take this break and we shift the way we live a little, and we shift the way we operate a little, what might be some opportunities to take us in a different direction so that we could keep going a little more wholeheartedly and a little less splintered, I work this part-time job, and then I'm here at Keeler Gardens on these days, and I can't do it at this time. And so after the shutdown, it was just, I was all in.
Yeah. And just observation.
Yeah.
A lot of people have awakenings, but very few people have the courage to get it out of the bed and make it real. And that's one of the things I hope to highlight the fact that you guys took that step and made Keeler Gardens a reality and an ongoing thing. And before I get into kind of how you guys are impacting communities, I want to hear about the facility, because I hear it's a very unique facility.
So yes, it's unique in that people don't understand. So the site is at an address on Keeler Avenue in Chicago. I mean, we're on Google Maps. We're 3631 North Keeler. It's actually our home. We live here. So the green space around the house is open to the community. So people are going to be watching this all over the states, I assume. So you may not know this, depending on where you live. We have what's called a parkway. So in the city, you walk down a sidewalk and there's a house there with a front lawn. And on the left, in many neighborhoods, most neighborhoods, there's what's called the parkway. It's this green space between the sidewalk and the street. And in some communities, it's virtually non-existent. And in other communities, it's quite substantial. And ours is quite substantial. So you're walking down the sidewalk and you have pollinator habitat there and front garden there. So it's a public space, no matter whether you like it or not. When you live on a city street, your place is public. But what we've done is we've advertised this, and it's a little odd, but we don't have any gates or fences on the property, that no locked gates or anything like that. So passersby can walk down the side of the house and sit in the back in the gazebo if they know of it and if they want to experience this. And we've advertised that for a lot of the community, and people do take advantage of it. They'll just come on in, and it's a little odd because it is our house, but we welcome it. There's also a sense of community there. So like people treat it like a sound space. They don't abuse it. We're very grateful for that. So when you're walking down the street, if you're just on the sidewalk, you can be at Keeler Gardens and you can sit on the front porch, and there's a bench in the front yard, and you can come to the back. And in the summer, we have like a tropical garden in the back, so you can smell the gardenias and the jasmine. So we manage the space as part of our programmatic activities and part of our offering to the community, and communities everywhere. Anybody from anywhere can come and use the space. But we also use the space as like a pilot. Like, so communities can come and see what we did, and we can say, we can take you through step by step how to create this or one portion of it in your community. All you need is a little piece of land. And like, for example, our pollinator habitat, it's got like 50 different native plants native to the Chicago, Illinois area. And it did take some babying the first couple of years, but in its fourth year, which was last year, we never watered it. We turned off the sprinkler system. So that pollinator habitat produces flowers and pollen, and it's an alive, beautiful space, and we never water it. So that's one of the educational points.
The beauty of using native species. They're supposed to be there.
Yes, and I will say that because the native plants do something good to the soil besides just use it well, there are a couple of non-natives, several non-natives. I would say like maybe 5 to 8% of the garden is non-natives that are considered good for the pollinators, and those plants also still thrive in that space.
Yeah. Well, I love the unique use of space. I just got done doing a program at a house, and they bought the house, and it's their offices. And the story behind it is, they started off, they bought a house, a smaller house, and had their staff there, and they turned it into a working space. And they grew, and they were looking for commercial space. And the staff said, no. We love the idea of working out of a house, even though it's been renovated to be like great tech and all that kind of stuff, great office, but it's a unique and unexpected way to use the space. And I love that that's what Keeler Gardens is this unique way that the community enters in to a very unique space, unexpected space that is leveraged. I'm curious, so you're saying that you're using this as a pilot and a model that other people can hope to use. Tell me, what do you hope to accomplish by having this be transferable to other communities?
So the pilot aspect of it is meant to be our message. So we want our service to the community to be communities in need see the value of these types of spaces and come to us and say, how do we do that? How do we recreate that? And I'm going to point backwards behind me to the image you see behind me. That's one of our programs. An artist developed this program just this year about how we can bring these nature spaces indoors. It's a less expensive, more doable concept for some spaces that don't have a lot of green space outside. So we've actually opened up the interior of the space to accommodate some of these interior examples so that people can see what can be done in a community that can shift that community in a variety of ways on both sides, like the different ways that can shift a community in different ways. And so we hope that when we invite visitors here, what they see is what the investment will look like, because these programs are an investment. We've talked about this before, how people we serve and the people that provide the resources to serve these people, that's a group of people that have to work together. So we're investing, we're taking people who care and who want to invest in developing this over here, which is a green space or an artistic installation. And it's hard to imagine what that will look like or what effect that will have in the future, but we have to trust that that benefit is something profound, impactful. And that's what we hope to accomplish with the space, is that people walk into the space and they immediately feel, oh, I get it. I understand how this could change someone's entire outlook, how this could change someone's focus, how this could shift someone to a sense of hope and connection.
So tell me, I mean, I want to get into that a little bit, but tell me why that's more than just a picture of a tree. Tell me what makes that process special.
Okay, so this is what makes the process special. So just the picture of a tree has its own value. Just being able to look at a picture of a tree instead of out a window at some sort of urban blight, let's say, that alone, that shift alone, that one image can improve your executive function, which is phenomenal. But it only does that. You have to physically be in green spaces for it to affect, for example, your killer T cells. That might be too complicated, too scientific for people. Your immune system, it raises your immune system. There are other immersive experiences that calm, and that calming sensation allows you, again, to have a conversation and learn to trust, maybe. So the thing is that one aspect is great. It's better than nothing. But a variety of different connections allows for a very complete addressing of a variety of different developmental and health, I won't say issues, but driving factors for our overall well-being. Did that answer your question?
Well, but I'm curious about how you are getting these in experiences indoors as a process and as a program.
Okay. I understand your question better. So the interior programs mimic the exterior programs in the process. So the first thing is that a group has to be willing to accept that they need a change. So they come to us, or a granting body comes to us, or let's say an alderman, in Chicago we have aldermen, someone of a leadership level comes to us and say, this community is aware that they need a shift, they need a change, even, let's admit, an improvement. They want something different and consequently maybe better. So that requires an initial investment from the community. And then our team sits down with the community and asks them, what are your challenges? Are we talking here about overcoming these challenges? Have you already overcome some challenges that you want to celebrate to keep the momentum going? It's so different for every community. For some communities, it's simply, we don't know what we need. We just need a change. And then my husband, Ed, who is he is a licensed clinical social worker, and he does all of our facilitation programs. So he facilitates a workshop, a conversation that pulls out some of these answers that can lead us to an endpoint of, do you think this would help? Do you think this would help? And then our artists, if it's going to be an interior design, translates those words into a tangible image that hopefully will inspire people every time they see it. Or I would design a garden space, a green space, or a nature space outdoors that would hopefully inspire and engage people every time they walk through it. So that process can be easy, it can be long, it can be as much as the community wants to contribute or share. It can be the community throwing their hands up in the air and saying, give us some ideas. And then we'll say yes or no. And I actually worked with people, and I've actually worked with this one group. It was fantastic. They're like, we don't care. If you can make it happen, just make it look good. Use whatever you have available. It doesn't matter, because what you will create will be more inspiring and more magical than the lack thereof, no matter what. How's that for an answer? Is that good enough?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, do you find it more fulfilling and effective if they don't just throw their hands up and say do something, if there's that involvement and engagement with whether it's interior or exterior, do you find it more effective in getting to your ends if there is that interaction?
So I find that truth is all that matters. If someone honestly believes they know nothing, they really don't have a preference, they just want it to be green, or they just want it to shine, or they just want it to be colorful. Any simple guiding direction. That's really all that matters, as long as everyone is honest. So our artist who did this, I don't have a picture of the other tree that she did. She did this for us because we asked for a tree. The program's called Vision Trees. And I told her I wanted it to look like a tree. And I don't know if you can tell from this picture, but the bark, the tree trunk, it actually feels like tree bark. So people walk into the room and they touch it. It's fantastic. But then we did another one that's installed in a different area. I told her, do whatever you want. It is so different from this. It is unbelievably whimsical, because she ran with it. And I truly believed that her vision would be inspiring, and it turned out awesome. But I truthfully didn't have a preference on what colors she used, on what message she was trying to portray. If the group, the individual, the community is truly honest about what they need, and if their honesty means they don't know, that's all that matters.
Yeah, so having, especially working with graphic artists and stuff like that, me not being an artist, there are times when I trust the artist and I just say, this is the look and feel I want, or whatever, and then go for it. And trusting the artist is so crucial in these projects. Otherwise, you're stifling the artistic talent, the people are bringing to the table. And also people who see things differently than you. They will look at that space, or look at that canvas, or look at that t-shirt and see something in a very different way than I do, not having that vision. And so I've learned when I learned to trust an artist, when we've worked together, it becomes like, all right, I need something like this, make it so. And they know me well enough, and I trust that they know me well enough to make it happen. Now, I'm curious because, like you talk about impact, and here is an interior space or a yard, a green space in one place. I'm curious about how it shifts an entire community. How does one space impact the wider community?
So the interior spaces are a little easier to speak to, because if you can imagine a hospital, a library, a school, an office building, a government building, a bank, a place where people are in and out of all day long. And if you put something that has a community-wide message, like in the lobby, and it's 2 stories tall. I don't know if you can see it on this one or not, but the one in the other area, the canopy actually goes up into the ceiling. So you can literally stand there and feel like you're standing under a tree. And then words can be worked into it, imagery can be worked into it. And people, it's beauty, it's aesthetics, it's tangible, and it's like, tactile, but it's also subliminal. And I don't mean that in a creepy way. I mean it in you don't realize how just walking past color and texture and a break of a white wall, you don't know that it's affecting you, but if you do it every day, slowly, that changes your chemistry, and it changes your outlook, and then it changes the way you speak to your colleagues and your coworkers. It changes the way you speak to people when you go home. It changes the way you want to treat the environment. It changes the way, maybe what you want to eat, or your own physical health, little by little. And that's why I call it an investment, because it takes time for this to happen. But it just, think about it actually from the perspective of any situation where we would decorate. You know how we put up decorations for the holidays, or for a birthday party, or for a retirement party, and it changes the whole nature of the room. It makes you want to celebrate. Or even in a mourning situation where some households would cover mirrors, it changes the nature of what you feel. That's how these situations can change people and then whole communities. And in outdoor spaces, what ends up happening is you take a small space and you make it a really nice nature space. And then the people who are over here, who are looking at your nice nature space, they're like, well, can I have one of those? Can I have one of those? And then it grows and it grows and it grows. Like our pollinator habitat, we could do the entire block with just plants we have from our pollinator habitat. And everyone walking down this block would be immersed in this whirlwind of bees and butterflies and birds flocking. It would change the nature of the entire block. And we can do that little by little with these spaces, just one green space at a time.
Yeah. So two questions that are related, but so, picture of a tree and all that. How is that different than when you go down to a yard sale and pick up a potted plant picture or a replicated landscape picture? How do your interior designs differ from the traditional just cookie cutter plant pictures or landscape pictures that you see in most public spaces? Or I think in particular, like you go to a courtyard inn and every room has the same two pictures of a plant and a tree. How is it different? How does that change? How does it make it more of a I've heard the term of a nature bath. How is it different?
So it's different in that it's diverse, as I mentioned before. So one image or imagery is great, but one is not faceted enough. You don't have enough facets. So if we were to really do this like full-fledged worldwide in every building, what would end up happening is that every room or every space would have an organic feel to it. So you might have pictures and you might have the same windows, but other aspects of the way that space is designed and managed would shift a little. So instead of just 4 white walls, one of the walls would have a color, any color. Some colors have different effects. Or you'd have the 2 images and then maybe you'd have some kind of a potted plant in the corner. Or maybe one of the walls, one of the corners wouldn't be a 90-degree. It would be a little bit of a rounded scalloped edge, because that softens and makes it feel more natural. This is like an overall long-term hope that we would change the way we build buildings. And there's a lot of biophilic design aspects out there now. But what we're trying to accomplish is that every aspect matters, but it's the diversity, as I mentioned. It's the multiples. It's do a little of this and a little of that and a little of that. And it can be little. You can have one image here, a picture in a frame. You can have one little potted plant over here. And you can even have a fake plant if it has something a little different. And so what that gives you is it gives you the different facets and components of those connections to give you all of the benefits, or as many of the benefits as your little space can manage. But if
it sounds like interior designers in general, they look at a space and they say, we want to have a very specific impact for that space. And it sounds like what you guys are looking for is, I will call it the biophilic impact, which
Sure.
is all the physiological and social advantages that come along with the impact of interacting with nature. And to me, it sounds like that's what, whether internally or outside, it's like the difference between walking through a forest and walking down a landscaped street. There's a different impact on your body. And it sounds like your design is to say, how can we create spaces where people get all of the physiological, emotional, social benefit of being in nature? Is that accurate, or is that close?
That's very close. But the key component here is that we're treating this conversation almost as if this was a choice or a luxury or an add-on. Okay, what we're trying to communicate, what Keeler Gardens is trying to communicate, is this approach should be like plumbing. Every building has indoor plumbing, heat, and in some cases, air conditioning, electricity. We believe that every building should have these components or the intention thereof, especially if it's like a government building, an office or a school, so that it's not up to the individual to make sure that they're getting the proper nature bath or nature immersion when they leave or when they go home, that everywhere we live and work and play and heal and learn, everywhere has an aspect of this. Again, facets. So you spend 8 hours a day at work or at school and you get a couple of those facets. You're walking home, like you said, through a pollinator habitat or a canopied area instead of an area that's just weedy lots. There's so much empty land in Chicago, land that no one's using or doing anything with because the land's just been acquired or gone back to the county or whatever. Those spaces could just be green spaces to just give people some of those facets. And if we did it everywhere and all the time, we wouldn't have to worry about everything being so excessive. Like we wouldn't have to worry about, oh, this community needs a park and this community needs it, because it would be everywhere all the time. It would be second nature. It would be like plumbing. It'd be like brushing your teeth every day.
Well, to me, as you talk about facets, things like that, I hear it almost like nutrition. It's like your health on a balanced diet, and part of our health depends on the facets having these biophilic facets in our day. And yeah, you could play with it, just like there's different diets and stuff like that. But if you're not getting the vitamins and minerals that you need, if you don't have the right percentage of carbohydrates and fats and proteins, then you're not going to be healthy. And I love the idea that having this, they're facets. You have these opportunities throughout your day that that there is some choicefulness in it. But if you make them easily available, honestly, I get kind of the willies. I live in a place in suburbia where you can walk down the street and everything is just amazingly, immaculately manicured. And I feel like, ew, and I can go, and we have these, fields, undeveloped fields, where it's the native plants have taken over again. And I walk by there and I'm going, yeah, that feels a little bit better. Because you see how even if it's just an empty lot that is returned to what it should be, grassland for us as chaparral, and people are going, wait, that's an eyesore. And I'm going, no, that's what it's supposed to be. And there's people have different appetites. And there's some people that would freak out if you put them. I joke that I work with a lot of outdoor facilitators and nature people. And if I want to put them outside their comfort zone, I'll make them spend the day in the mall. They wig out there. But then I work with these corporate people and bankers. If you put them outside for a day, they freak out. And it's that ability to access something that is going to have a positive impact that you didn't expect. And I think a lot of people don't expect what you're talking about is walking into a bank and having a facet that impacts them in a natural way, or walking in, again, spending a lot of time in hotels. This is something I wish the hotels would do, rather than walking into, oh, those are nice kind of replicated pictures that feel sterile. They get to see that it enhances a guest's experience when they put some thought into it. So
there's so many different aspects of what you just said that are critical to the overall message. So you're talking about facets and environments, and so even with what we do, even our work has to focus on different environments. Like soil is its own environment, and then like the green space is its own environment, and then there's different kinds of green spaces. Like there's urban agriculture and there's nature play, and then there's urban spaces too, indoors and out. So each one of those can be considered its own facet, but within that, it has to be balanced. So just like you talk about a balanced diet, the soil has to be balanced. And just like you talk about balanced experiences, like when you walk into the lobby of a hotel, even that needs to be balanced. And it goes back to this sense of trying to maintain that balance without being overwhelmed, and communities get overwhelmed, just like people get overwhelmed. Like if you heard like every single thing that you needed to do to be healthy, every vitamin you had to take, and every way you're supposed to eat, and all the calories and this and that, and the components and the minerals and blah, 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 you'd get overwhelmed. And communities get overwhelmed because they have so much need that they can't balance, they can't even prioritize their needs, because some of them are just trying to survive. And so
this is where my background in biology impacted how I look at organizations, and this concept of ecosystems, and the idea that, first of all, ecosystems, or natural ecosystems, are fragile, and small changes has big effects. Now, managed ecosystems or farms are not fragile at all. And people get overwhelmed when they try and manage balance. And the fact of the matter is, ecosystems balance isn't what we're talking about. We're talking about equal tensions to reach homeostasis. It stays the same because it's managing all the changes that are around in such a way to maintain it. Now, what a farmer does is realize there's a lot of stuff that's out of their control, but there's a ton of stuff like soil pH, like moisture, like even temperature and humidity, all those things they can influence. And so they look at, my grandfather was an apple farmer. So I have this farming mentality around a lot of things, and then made a lot of sense, like ecosystems. And then I learned about systems thinking, which applies that across the board. And this idea of coming in and understanding the whatever environment you're working with, internal groups, stuff like that, it is a managed ecosystem. You're doing something to create an impact on purpose. And it's not about managing every little thing. It's about understanding how everything interacts, so that you, like when you make, you see this all the time. I use nature examples, like, they introduced cats to Hawaii, and they ended up almost wiping out the only native duck in Hawaii. They put, rabbits in Australia, and there was no natural predators, so they just overwhelmed it. And there's all these things where we try and manage things individually, and we don't think about the systems that we're introducing things into. And so when I think about, when I work with organizations, you're a system, but you're not a computer system. You're not a mechanical system. You're an organic system. And more likely or not, you want to be not a natural ecosystem, which is fragile and non-resilient. You want to be a managed ecosystem, so you continue to get the results that you intended. And that means stepping back and saying, oh, okay, we are all part of these systems, these environments that we step into. And so if I want to get all the benefits of what happens as I walk through a forest, and have that happen in a bank, or have that happen in a neighborhood, I've got to realize I'm part of that system. And the way I step into it is just important as the way that it's created and managed. Does that make any sense at all in your world?
So that's almost exactly the way we explain how soil science works, from the way we here at Keeler Gardens do, because I don't have a degree in soil science. I just have some knowledge. And one of the things the points that we make about soil science, and which is very similar to how you're talking about, we're part of a system, is that, so soil is a living ecosystem. There's a whole set of microorganisms all the way up to things we can see, like, worms and spiders and whatnot. And that's what makes the soil function, because they all have a role, right? And so the number that I really like to throw around, which I find so compelling, is that we've identified, and when I say we, I mean like the royal we, like the world, has identified only about 5% of all the stuff growing, all the microorganisms growing in soil. So we know there's mycorrhizal fungi, we know there's different microorganisms, bacteria, whatever. But 95% of that living material, we don't even know what it's called or what it does, but it matters. And so we try to manage or help that system be balanced in a way that is as original or as natural. It's called regenerative soil or rebuilding soil, in a way that is as realistic or as original as possible so that that system can function, because it does really well on its own. And that is akin to when you give people a handful of the bits and pieces that they need, like safety and security and trust, and a lot of what these nature spaces create, in addition to a lot of other, health aspects and sound living aspects. There's a whole bunch of stuff that happens that we could document with like every spike of oxytocin and every, decrease of this and increase of that. But there's this whole component and this whole like realization of how the ecosystem or any system then functions really well, just like skyrockets in its productivity, that we really, we can't really explain with one statistic or one piece of information.
Yeah, without the others. And so like coming from a science background, we understand things through dissection. And the story I have is that I was in my zoology class, Zoology 131, which is the weeder class for biology students, hard, difficult class. And in the lab, first day, and I'm sure you experienced this, is first day you come in there, it's a lab, you got 3 hours, and nobody has their dissecting gear or anything like that at the start. So the lab instructor sat us down, and there were terrariums with frogs in the middle of the table. And he basically says, she says, open up your lab notebook or take a piece of paper out, and I want you to write down everything you notice about that frog. And so they're just wasting time. No, we can't start dissecting yet. And I'm there, I want to cut things. And so we get through all the orientation. We write our observations for the rest of the time. It was about an hour and 15 minutes of just observing frogs. So we're okay. Next time we show up, Tuesday, Thursday lab. So Thursday we show up. We all have the right equipment and the right gear, and we're ready to go. And the professor, she says, all right, take out the paper you were working on last time, and I want you to write down everything you didn't notice about the frogs the first time. And finally, somebody got brave enough, not me, but somebody stood up and said, excuse me, professor, but this is a zoology lab. Aren't we supposed to be like dissecting things and understanding by dissection and the pieces? And she says, yes, and you'll get to do that. But understand, once you cut open that frog, it's no longer a frog, it's frog parts. And that, set me back on my heels, because it helped me understand that while we understand through dissection, we experience the world before we cut into it. And that, so I think of it as a prism. We understand light. We shoot light through a prism and it refracts it into its spectrum. That's how we understand it. But we live on the other side. We live in whole light. We live in the big picture. And yes, we can, like what you're saying, we could take every single incident where oxycodone or the, what is it?
Oxytocin.
Oxytocin and dopamine hits, and even the cortisol hits.
Mm-hmm.
And we can document all that kind of stuff, but we experience the world not in those bits and pieces, but we experience the world by walking through the whole thing, which is the entire, like soil science says, we're going to look at the system that is found in soil. And in system studies, you need to define what system you're looking at. But then you can step out and say, you know what, soil is part of a larger system that includes macro plants and animals and flora and fauna. And then, okay, so let's look at that system. And then you step back and say, but it also includes, non-biological functions like weather and climate and you can just keep on stepping back. Ultimately, we live in the world, which isn't about a dissection. It's about that frog that's jumping around, not frog parts.
And it goes both directions too. So that frog that's jumping around, if one bone is broken or malformed, then the frog is different. And that's how communities can function. One person can change a community. One space can change a community. And
I want to get to that, because one of the things that what you're trying to do through Keeler Gardens is like instill hope and in the community and in people that change is possible. How does that happen with the Keeler Gardens approach?
So we've been thinking about this a lot lately because we do a lot of professional development and that's outside specifically like soil science or plant based. We do a lot of psychological research, and I don't mean research like clinical research. I mean just, you know, like learning about different aspects of how people behave and why they behave the way they behave, to speak to some of what we're talking about here. So one of the things that we've been educated on is that children up to a certain age have a sense of trust and acceptance and honesty and truth and wonder, that, you know, they're just, everything is wide-eyed and wow, everything they see is wow, wow, wow. But we lose that at some point for whatever reason. We're not going to go into the deep psychological discussions, but what Keeler Gardens does is we reset that and we allow some of that wow to take over again. Because when you allow for some of that sort of childlike wonder, what you're doing is you're opening your eyes to something that you can't really explain or define, but it's something that you can believe. So what happens is some of these communities, they have these, what we call limiting beliefs, these sort of rules that have been instilled because of the way the community has been and the things that have happened to them. And they get to a point where they feel like that something beyond that is not possible, but you give them one little spark of wonder. And then suddenly, well, maybe something is possible. And it stems from that sort of like, you know, heart pumping message. It's really quite, I don't know, I would say it's energy based, but it really has to be internal. It has to be, each individual has to really choose to allow that, because you can get stuck in your rules and stuck in your box and say, it doesn't matter what you do, nothing will change. That can happen too.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, the bio geek in me wants to go all kinds of weird ways that I don't know that my audience would appreciate. Although we do, it's interesting. I've got such a broad range of people who watch this, from entrepreneurs, which I think your story speaks to an entrepreneurial spirit. I've got outdoor people and experiential educators and all that. So there's a lot for different people to grab here. But I want to ask you, this is basically, I want to give you an opportunity to do some like lightning round stuff.
Okay.
And I'm going to ask you some questions and just give me your, what off the top of the head. You're not like making a contract that this is where you're going to stand firm, but first response, and then we'll move through it quickly. So I want to know, what is your favorite book, or now in these days media, to give as a gift? And you know, what is it that you want to hand people besides plants? Is there a book or media that you like to recommend or give?
So I'll start by saying I believe that we need to create a pamphlet or a book of sorts to compile some of this in a way that anybody can read and be compelled by, like a small magazine style. But gosh, to tell you the truth, I don't know that I have one. The one that off the top of my head comes to mind is the no maintenance plan, or the no maintenance garden. It's the KNOW maintenance. And it speaks a lot about what we do at Keeler Gardens. It doesn't have the whole thing from end to end, but there's a big chunk of what we do in the middle that the no maintenance plan speaks to. And that's how you can create things that are still beautiful and still aesthetic and still appear slightly manicured or intentional, but have this natural aspect that allow it to be more doable.
That's perfect. I think that gives people insight into why you're doing what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me this, who are some of your heroes? And what's interesting is that I've asked this question. A lot of people say, well, I don't have heroes. So in this case, what you're going to do is like Build-A-Bear. Who are some of the heroes? What would you take from different people to assemble your hero?
So Olmsted, I believe is how it's pronounced, was one of the original landscape, grandfathers of landscape design. Really incorporated this idea of how natural spaces matter and incorporated that into a lot of different cities across the country. And then E.O. Wilson is a biophilia staunch, supporter, developer of biophilia as a concept. So those two for sure. I don't have a specific person in mind, but honestly, anyone that can take a message and turn it into something powerful that creates a change would be a hero to me. I mean, there's lots of people just around that have done that little bit by bit. I'm a fan of this one colleague that I work with. I think that she's like half my age, and she has like the grace and the intention of someone who's seen it all, and she's like half my age. So it's people like that.
Well, tell me, who is that?
Her name is Hannah. She's actually getting her master's in plant science as we speak. She doesn't know this yet, but I would love to have her be a successor and have her be like sort of the next director of Keeler Gardens, because she helped us. She was here in Chicago for a short term, working with a group that did STEM programs in underserved communities, and we worked together for a while. But she just has this natural, like, she just walks around like everything's good, even when she doesn't know, or even if she doesn't have an answer. She's like, well, we can figure it out. We'll find the answer. We can do that. It's those kinds of people, that sort of like internal just knowing or peace that I think brings something special, some like possibilities and some balance to some of the off-kilteredness that we feel sometimes. Yeah.
So last lightning round question. Sure. What is one thing you've rethought or changed your mind about? And it can be recently, or could be something a while ago that really kind of set you in a new direction.
There's a lot.
Well, choose one or two. What's one thing you've rethought?
The one big thing is that sense of wonder. We have always tried to instill that. I mean, that was our message for a really long time. But what I'm realizing is that we ourselves have lost that sense of wonder, or have lost the active, overwhelming embracing of it on a minute to minute basis. And that's where the passion shifts, when you can really have that drive every minute, even if you're not doing anything about it. It all used to be about lists and what are we doing and where are we going and how are we making that happen. But I've learned over the recent past that just embracing that wonder is where the shift comes, and then your action is inspired.
Yeah, it goes back to when my knees still bent and my shoulders worked. When I would lead backpacking trips, I'd be so task oriented until I took the first step off onto the trailhead, and there's this existential sigh. And it's like everything, I'm leading the trip, but everything fades in the back, all the lists, all the plans, all the maps, all that kind of stuff. And you just have to take a moment and go, wow. And that's one of the things I miss about that experience. But you're right. How do you take that into that daily wonder?
So what I learned about myself physically that helps me, I learned that my physical stance was one of always leaning forward, like with my head going in a direction. And I realized that I was doing everything like that. I was washing the dishes like that. I was drying my hair like that with my head forward. I was walking, into the grocery store with my head forward. And it occurred to me that my whole driving force was one of having to accomplish something. There was really no trust, no excitement in that push. And so there are two physical things that I do. I literally just step back. You talk about that existential sigh, and I do it. When I see myself leaning forward or pushing forward, I literally just sit back, and it changes everything. And I also learned this other trick from one of the groups that we study with, is that think about where you hold, how you hold your jaw. And if your tongue is pushed up against the roof of your mouth, you're actually stimulating your body to say, go, go, go. So if you find yourself unable to sit still or sit in the moment or experience something, some kind of joy, drop your jaw, your lower jaw, and rest your tongue on the bottom of your mouth. And it literally like just resets your whole body to like stop for just a few seconds.
But I wonder if there's like a cause and effect, what the cause and effect is, because most of the time when you're in wonder, you usually look up with your mouth open, the jaw drop. And I wonder if that is the effect where you do that and then you get that calming effect, or if I think it's probably reciprocal to where you can generate those feelings by doing it, but when you feel it spontaneously, you go to that position.
So what I believe happens, if you're looking at it like biologically in chemistry, is that the wonder is so arresting, like you literally just stop, and then your jaw will drop and your tongue will fall down because your body stops. And so that reactive nature of pushing forward and clenching your jaw, it's just loosened, and it allows you to just stop. And so then yes, you can mimic it by doing it the other way. So if you find yourself all freaked out, just wonder, drop your jaw. Yeah.
Breathe and drop your jaw. So we would tell when hiking with inexperienced hikers, they would oftentimes start to feel nauseous or whatever. And it was because they were hiking, looking at their feet. And you tend to get, we call it hiking sickness, but it's motion sickness because your head's bobbing along, but you're looking at the same place, looking down, and you're afraid I might trip. But ultimately, you need to look up in order to avoid that motion sickness, but it also helps you enjoy the space you're walking in. So,
and actually there's biological benefits to that. So I'm a singer, I have sung most of my life. And one of the things that we're taught is that when you hold your music, you hold it out like this so that you can breathe while you're singing. Because if you do this, you can't breathe appropriately. And the other thing that we were taught with calming breaths is that don't take a deep breath in to start. Let your breath out to start. Because if you take a deep breath in to start, you're sort of setting in like a fight or flight kind of reaction. So when you're trying to calm down, the first thing you should do is breathe out. And then you can take a deep breath in to reset.
Right. Well, Gina, thank you for this. I want to know, how can people connect with you and how can people connect with Keeler Gardens? Okay, so if you're not in the Chicago area and you want to learn more about us, we are keelergardens.org. You can go to our website. That's my email to Gina at keelergardens.org. It's KEELER gardens with an S.org. You can email me. If you're in Chicago, we're on the northwest side, 3631 North Keeler Avenue. We're sort of halfway between downtown and O'Hare Airport. Let's see. If you are interested in any kind of developing any programs or championing what we do, please reach out. What we're really hoping to do is garner enough excitement with presentations and speaking events that we can catch the eye of development in the community and in any community, any area that needs a shift or a change. And we're happy to do that virtually anywhere. The only difference doing it from here in Chicago to anywhere is that the plant list would be different if we're working with natives. Otherwise, it's pretty straightforward for us to offer some of the inspiration and some of what we do to make change anywhere. So Gina at keelergardens.org. Keelergardens.org is our website, and Keeler Avenue in Chicago if you're in the area. Wonderful. Well, thank you for spending the time with me. And I've thoroughly enjoyed exploring and scratching my BioGeek itch and all that kind of stuff. So thank you very much.
And thank you. If anyone would like to learn more or wants to experience some of the presentations, just let me know. And I'm happy to talk about, the way we present and what we present on and how we can maybe inspire people everywhere.
Be present and kind as you do great things.